Hi, welcome back. In this video, what we're going to be doing is to install and configure SQL Server 2016, and that is what I have identified in my slide right here, which is going to be the target for this particular video. So we're going to install and configure SQL 2016. It's going to be a standalone installation. It is for always on. You don't need to do a SQL mode. I beg your pardon. You don't need to do a cluster mode installation. It's going to be, even though we configured cluster on the Windows level, the SQL installation itself is going to be on a standalone mode. Bear that in mind. So these are interview questions, so bear that in mind, right? Again, I know I mentioned in the previous video that you can basically use the same configuration and installation we did for SQL 2014, which was the installation, the installation itself, the post installation, all the different activities that we did. You can do pretty much the same thing for 2016. So if you're using 2014, you could just go ahead and do the same thing, and you're done. You're just going to add the extra layer on top of it, which is going to be to use always on. So if your goal is to use always on for 2014, use that same set of videos and watch the part where we enable always on, right? And add that to that video. So we'll get to that too. But the reason I have decided to make this 2016 installation again is just to show you the few differences. So most of the concepts remain the same. It's just a couple of things that you need to know to also get experience and the feel of how 2016 edition look like. So this is going to be also an added advantage that you can place on your CV, because this is pretty much having the experience with the technology. All right, so let's get straight to it. So one thing I need you to know already is I have done my own part of the entire configuration on the primary. As you can see, SQL 2016 is up and running on primary, and I have the disks configured. So I have data configured for E, log configured for L. Okay, so we're going to do that on secondary. We're going to do the same installation on secondary, but I need you to know that the disk configuration has been done on the secondary as well. But bear in mind that whatever label you give to your disk has to be the same on both environments, right? And what that basically means is whatever purpose you designate for your disk drives has to be uniform. So if you plan to put your data files on E, make sure data file live on E on all of the servers, regardless of the number of replicas. So if you have 5, 6, 8 replicas, make sure data is on E on all of them. If you designated some other letter, basically just know that and use that letter for all of them. Similarly for the log file and your backup, if you decide to have a different drive for backup. But in our own case, I haven't created anyone for backup. It's just the data and the log file. So you should do that, and of course make sure you've mapped your network so you can have access to the files on the host computer. So this is my virtual file share, which enables me to have this. As you can see on my main computer, let me just show you. So this is the virtual file share on my main computer. So you can see all these folders that are here. So basically I just want to have access to that from my secondary. So these are things that you already know, just a way of recapping the whole thing. Right, so let's now get the binaries for 2016. If you go to Google, download SQL Server 2016 evaluation, look out for Try Active SQL Server 2016 with Service Pack 1. So it's been bundled with Service Pack 1 already for you. And again, if you're curious, you want to know which of the service packs are available, you know the build site that you can go to. We've treated all of these things in the 2014 standalone installation. So you can just go to that website and see the latest service pack. So if you need to patch the SQL Server installation, you know how to do that. You can go ahead and do that. And once you go to that link, it's pretty much the same things that you've been doing. Just download the ISO and get to it. So I have done that already. So let me quickly show you where that is. Okay. Right. So here I have in my ISO folder, I have SQL 2016, and this is what I have downloaded. You can see SQL 2016 and SP1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and put it on the desktop because I don't want to run it straight from the network. All right, so these are best practices you need to bear in mind. So if you have binaries and files that are heavy sitting in a network folder, you want to run the installation on your local VM. I'm not talking about local host, I'm talking about the VM now. So in our case, the secondary is the VM. So I want to run the installation locally to that VM, right? So to do that, I have decided to create a folder for SQL 2016 and then copy that binary there. And now I can run it straight from there. Okay. So you can see the feel is a little different. So at this point, what I want to do is, you can see there's basic, there's custom, there's download media. We have the media downloaded already anyway. So what I want to do is to select the custom installation. You can do that. And where do I want this to go? I don't want it to be in the C drive. So I just want to go to the same SQL 2016 that I created on the desktop, as you can see there, and install. This is going to take a while, so what I'm going to do is pause the recording so that we don't spend too much time on this. This is still downloading, and just to show you what we're downloading is, as you can see, this is what we had before. Now it's giving us this too. By the time it's complete, it's gonna have it can book both into a folder for us. So let's just wait for the installation to complete. So now that the installation is complete, as you can see, it has packaged the files into this folder called evaluations. If I open up that, you can now see all the bunch of folders and media binary files that's been bundled into that. And this has also changed. You can see the view now. You can basically hit on installation, and what we're interested in is this new SQL Server standalone installation. As you can see, launch a wizard to install SQL Server 2016 in a non-clustered environment. That's what we're interested in, right? So even though it says in a non-clustered environment, it's not talking about Windows cluster, it's talking about SQL non-cluster. So if you had a SQL Server installation which will be based on cluster on the SQL level, then we'll be interested in this one. Or if you wanted to add this installation to an existing failover cluster, but in this case it's going to be a standalone. And by the time we complete this whole thing, you understand where the cluster sits in the whole picture basically. Now one thing that's also different is this is not packaged together with the Management Studio, so we have to install Management Studio separately, and that would mean hitting on this link also by the time we finish this installation. So these are the two basic links that we're interested in. So we'll start with the first one. And if you notice, if I click on this second one, which I'll do in a minute, it's going to open a browser. So that browser is basically saying, so this link is basically saying, okay, I'm going to take you to a browser, a URL where you can download Management Studio. So I'll do that in a minute, but let's carry on with this installation. Hit next. Next. This is optional if you want. And these are things you're already familiar with. Alright, so at this point you can see that there are a few new features that you might want to add. So for example, Polybase. So we're not talking about Polybase here. That's got to do with big data, Hadoop. And you can see it's got R services. So all these are newly added, which is all different from SQL 2014, which we didn't have any of those before. In our own case, what we're interested in is the database engine. We're not using replication here. So if you were to use replication alongside always on, then obviously you need to use that. And we don't want analysis or reporting services. Okay, so you can decide on what shared features you're interested in. So I'm only interested in the client connectivity tools because we might want to connect to this remotely from Management Studio outside of the server. And SQL client connectivity, yeah, and that'll be it basically. Hit next. This is going to be a default instance, and I believe you already know what that is, and we're not going into any detail. All these have been covered in standalone installation with 2014. And here we're going to basically look for our service account. Each of the servers will run their own service account. So in the case of primary, I used the primary SQL admin. Here I'm going to use a secondary SQL admin, and this is best practice, by the way. In some environment you see just one service account that's being used across the board. So the cluster is going to use the same service account, SQL will use the same service account, and you know that is prone to some security potholes. There are some loopholes around there that if anyone gets hold of that service account, they basically have access to your infrastructure. But if you can limit the security concerns if you use the specific service account for a specific use. In our own case, this service account can only run on this box, but the now in the real world there are ways in which we extend these functionalities for always on, because the service account also need access on the other server, and the reason is because when there is a failover and the service running the account needs access to some files, you know, the way it is the sysadmin can actually dedicate one account and give permissions to that account. It's kind of like a proxy thing where secondary and primary can both access the same thing using a proxy account. So we're not going to cover this yet. This is beyond the scope of what's going on, but just be aware that if you get into conversations around using proxy account and things like that, don't just seem like a novice, right? So hit OK for that, copy, paste. That's the password right there, and I'll do the same for the database engine, and that's it. So here is one of the things I wanted you to see. In the previous videos around standalone installation, at the post installation, you notice that we did this volume maintenance thing where we talked about instant file initialization, avoiding zeroing of data pages and things like that. In 2016, you have this functionality where you can basically check the box, and you don't have to do this after the installation, so it's going to sort that out for you alongside the installation. So this is one of the big changes that's well, I wouldn't say big change, because polybase and some encryption technologies that was introduced in SQL 2016 can be categorized as big change, but this is also a huge change because a lot of DBAs are not aware of this, and they run into performance issues trying to create databases. It runs for a very long time, and ultimately they don't know why that's the case, and this is one of the huge reasons for that. So because it's not really of great visibility to a lot of DBAs, I like the fact that SQL Server, Microsoft have decided to put this functionality here, and you can just check the box straight away and carry on. And mind you, this is also a very important exam question that comes out a lot in the 70-462 exam. If you intend to write that exam, bear in mind this instant file initialization is one of the questions that do come out a lot. So if you want to read more, please feel free to do that. And I'm sure you already know what collation is, so I don't want to go into that. This session is not to go into each of the details. We've done that already. So for mixed mode, so we want mixed mode and Windows, which is going to be SQL Server authentication and Windows authentication. We've covered that before as well. I'm just going to carry on putting all the details. Okay, so I've added this current user. So data directories. I want data to be on the E drive, so I've literally copied that, removed it, and put E colon, and as you can see, that changed everything. In case you didn't see that, let me change it. So this is what was there before. What I've done is remove that, put E colon, and everything has changed. I want the backup directory to be on the E drive as well, and that's the whole essence of the E drive, which is data. So data is going to be there. TempDB, this is another huge change. So now you can configure TempDB. So this view is quite different from what you're familiar with. At the stage of this installation, you can specify how many number of TempDB data files you want. If the SQL Server database, so this is basically going to form the default for each of the databases that get created. So if you specify more than one, when you create a new database, it's going to basically initialize it with the number of data files that you've specified and the size in MB and the auto growth setting that you want for the TempDB. Take note, the log file should be 1 regardless of the number of data files. You can only have 1 log file per database. I haven't seen any use case for having more than 1 log file, but it is possible to have more than 1 log file, but you hardly ever see things like that. All right, so if you wanted to have more data directories, you can basically do that, but I'm just going to leave everything at default. You can do that as well. File stream, if you want to enable file stream, you can do that right from the installation, but we're not going to be doing that either, so just leave it unchecked. Hit next. And for automated install, you might want to keep this INI file somewhere. Using INI is also beyond the scope of this particular series, so I'll probably find some time to do a separate training on SQL Server automation, how you can automate the whole of this thing using PowerShell. And of course, you can have an INI file like this, which would contain everything that we've specified, everything. And by running that on the terminal, it's just going to do your installation for you silently without you having to do next or anything. Everything that we have been specifying from the start up to this point has been nicely laid out in this INI file, and we can just hit install and continue the installation. And let me quickly show you what happens when you hit on this Management Studio. While that's going on, you can see it takes us to this URL. So now one thing for your server, you might have all this coming up, right? And you have to basically add it, add and close, but it's gonna keep coming up. There's a whole lot of them that will come up. To avoid this, there's some settings you can do in Internet Explorer. I haven't explored that, but I know it's something that you can do. If you want to do that, you can do that. But to simplify the whole thing, I have basically gotten the URL. So I'll make the URL available to you. So basically just copy that URL and go to the URL. So I've saved the URL in my temp folder, in a temp file, and here it is. That didn't copy. Let's copy that again. Oops, I don't know why that's happening. Okay, right click and copy. Right, so here it is. So what you'll be interested in is the latest one, 17.1, and you can basically download. Oh yeah, here it is. So you can download it from here, SQL Server Management Studio. Right, so if you click on that, it's just gonna download it for you. And once you have that, after your installation is complete, then you can run the installer again to install the Management Studio. Otherwise, you won't be able to connect remotely to your installation. In my own case, so this is what will be downloaded. You can see the icon, the way the logo is kind of different from what you may be familiar with already. So yeah, so that's it. So I'm just gonna wait for this installation to complete. I'll pause the video. Okay, let's see where we are. Okay, so that's still going. Let's just wait. Let's just pause the video so we don't have too many hours. All right, so we have installation completed. We have our installation completed now, and it's asking us to restart the server. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to restart the server, and in the next video we will then configure our always on availability group and start working with always on. Alright, so see you in the next video.